Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Malformed Data. Tell me to appeal my unfair grade? You got it. Let's jump right in. Many years ago, it's a joke, leave me alone, I was a student studying computer science in the Midwest. While most of my professors were okay, there was one that was notorious. Let's call him Dr. J. Dr. J was an old, effete, lazy professor with a thick Southeast Asian accent whom had been teaching for the better part of 30 years and had fully embraced the typical semi-retired lifestyle of the tenured professor. Showing up to office hours? Maybe. Showing up to help in a lab? Once the whole semester. I estimated out of the 3.5 hours per week of lecture time, he was actually in the classroom for maybe half of it, and the time that he did spend in the classroom was a complete waste. He would just pass out packets at the beginning of class that contained numerous diagrams and handwritten notes that were indecipherable and meander around the class, pointing at various parts to groups of people working on them, and mumble incoherently about how to solve it, I think. I never understood a word he said. He never followed his course syllabus or even answered emails. For anyone who's taken an engineering course, especially an upper level one, this won't sound too crazy, but here's the kicker, he would fail regularly half the class for a required upper level computer architecture course. This is exceptionally rare and completely unfair for a class at this level, especially at a state school that isn't a research university. Typically, the interlopers have been weeded out by junior year, so while the rest of the classes are by no means a cakewalk, if you put forth an honest effort to learn the material, you should be able to pass the class with flying colors. Not so with Dr. J. Failing a class at the level of this course could be devastating to your degree path, since it was a required course. Dr. J was the only one to teach it, and it was only taught in the fall. But Dr. J couldn't be bothered, despite the class average for his exams being something like 2 of 15, not that scores mattered, because you could get the same score as someone on all the assignments and exams, but you'd fail the class for who the F knows why. Here's the malicious compliance. Lo and behold, I'm one of the 16 out of 31 students in the class that he failed that semester, and I failed having gotten very similar scores to a couple other students, but they passed. I went to Dr. J's office after the scores had been applied to our transcripts online to discuss the matter. Dr. J wouldn't have any of it. Doesn't matter that I had similar scores to other students that had passed. There's many ways I grade my students and you failed. If you don't like it, you're free to appeal the grade, but you won't get it. The fact that the little crap was sitting there in his chair trying to BS me pissed me off so damn much, I decided right then and there to F his crap up. My school has a very well laid out and reasonable grade appeal policy with many avenues towards getting the appeal approved. I knew that through some of the snide jokes they made, my other professors did not take kindly to Dr. J at all. So it wasn't just the students that strongly disliked him. Well, when you appeal a grade, the other professors in the department are the ones who get to decide whether or not you actually passed, given certain evidence. It's practically criminal what he gets away with, were the words of my faculty advisor. Now, my original plan was for me to just file an appeal and move on, because I knew I'd get it. But Dr. J had poked the bear and now I was mad. So I reached out to everyone in the class, very easy since we are all on a Slack channel together, and set a meeting in a conference room in the library. I guess I underestimated how much everyone hated Dr. J because everyone from the class showed up. I laid out my plan, everyone filed a grade appeal, even if you passed, if it'll help your GPA. At my school, a grade appeal will replace your letter grade with a satisfactory, which means you get credit for the course without a grade that affects your GPA. I had enough appeal forms pre-printed before the meeting so that everyone could fill it out together. It was the happiest I'd ever seen that group of people the entire semester. I think the final count of appeals was something like 22. Everyone whose GPA could be improved with a satisfactory applied for one. You should have seen the look on the department chair's face when we showed up with a stack of appeals. No department in the history of the school had ever had that many appeals or complaints for a single course, let alone for a single professor. I know this because the dean sat us all down and said so. There were so many appeals, they had to bring us into the faculty panel in groups of 3 to 4. Not that it mattered, the whole thing was a formality as the die was cast. 2 weeks later, we heard the news. Everyone, literally everyone, had gotten their appeal approved. Dr. J was given a formal warning by the uni and had most of his courses taken away and are now taught by other people. He still holds on to the computer architecture course and some freshman intro classes, but from what I've heard, he hasn't failed anyone for a long time. So if you're a lazy prick of a professor, be warned, you might get someone like me for a student who foments an insurrection in your class and turns your job upside down. Now, why would a teacher fail half their class intentionally? Doesn't that make it look like they're not treating that class effectively if half of their class isn't even making it through? I don't quite get that. Now, if this guy had so much experience and tenure there that they just didn't look into it, well then that says a lot more about the school system than anything else. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Rabid Rathian. You can't call in sick this early. You can't call in sick this late. You have to come to work. You shouldn't have come to work. Let's jump right in. Background: I suffer from migraines, and unfortunately when I get one they tend to last 3 to 4 days, leaving me completely incapacitated and unable to do anything more than lie in my bed in a dark room and cry and vomit. This means that when I get one, I basically know straight away that I'm not going to be doing anything for the next few days. I have a casual retail job in addition to other work which I've had for almost 20 years across different stores. I was always the one who worked extra hard and stepped up to do extra shifts or stay back when someone else couldn't come in. But the department manager we had at the time of this story was a narcissist who got off on bullying staff, but really disliked me because I stood up for myself. The funniest part was that she loved to try to stand over people to intimidate them, but with me it failed miserably because I was about a half foot taller than her. About 15 years ago, I started to get a migraine in the middle of the day before I was meant to have a shift starting at 5 p.m. Knowing I wouldn't be able to work the following day, I called the manager to let her know I wouldn't be able to come in, thinking it would give her plenty of notice to find a replacement. Her response: "You can't call in sick the day before your shift. You don't know that you'll still be sick tomorrow. If you're really sick tomorrow, then you can call in." Okay, fine. Went to bed dosed up on prescription painkillers, woke up at 10 a.m. still feeling like a railroad spike had been driven through my eye socket. So I called up again. The manager: "Your shift doesn't start for another 7 hours. You're just trying to get out of work. You'll probably be fine by 5 o'clock, so I'm not going to replace you yet." Alright, went back to bed and was so wiped I didn't wake up till about 3:30. We were supposed to give 2 hours notice, so by this point it was half an hour too late. Or it would have been if I hadn't already given notice twice previously. Anyway, I was still in no shape to even get to work, let alone work, so I rang up for a third time and asked to speak to the department manager again. She was not happy. "You've only given me an hour and a half notice. That's not enough. You better show up to work. I've told you twice over the last 2 days that I wouldn't be able to come in." At this point, I literally had to stop and be sick. "I can't come in. You've known that since yesterday. If you're not at work by 5 p.m., I'm gonna make sure you don't get any extra shifts." This was when I decided to be maliciously compliant, though I hadn't heard of that term back then. I asked my mother to drive me to work. She asked if I was really that spiteful I'd go into work sick just to make a point. And, well, yes. Yes, I am that spiteful. Clocked in, and then went and sat in the fitting room under the bench instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing. My colleagues were horrified, asking what the heck was I doing there in that condition. And I told them that I'd tried calling in sick, but manager had threatened to stop giving me shifts if I didn't show up. Those colleagues were great. One brought me a glass of water, and another let me borrow her sunglasses so I could try to cut out some of the bright shop lights. After about half an hour, the manager came in, saw that I wasn't doing any work, and bent down so she could scream in my face, and I leaned forward and threw up all over her shoes. At this point, I could have held it in until I was able to get a cleaning bucket out of the cupboard, but I decided to just let her have it instead. She went absolutely nuclear and started screaming even harder. "Why would you come to work like this? You should have stayed home." And I was feeling so sick and miserable, and her screeching was reverberating in my head and making the pain worse. So I started crying and ended up being sick again all over the floor. As she stormed off, my colleagues called the store manager over, who was immediately horrified that I was at work in that condition, and called my mother to come and collect me and said that manager would be sternly talked to. Luckily, she was in hiding somewhere when my mother arrived, or she would have ripped her a new one. Because managers and HR will always look out for each other, no matter how crappy they are, the department manager didn't face any real consequences as far as I know. But after that, she pretty much pretended I didn't exist, which suited me right down to the ground. And not long afterwards, I was able to transfer to another store, so I didn't have to put up with her constantly throwing her toys out of the pram anymore. I can't say I've ever experienced a migraine myself, so I can't imagine what it feels like, but knowing that my wife gets them and how debilitating they are to her, I can sympathize with OP in this story just a little bit. The icing on the cake in this story is definitely the puking on the manager's shoes. However, you should have aimed up a little bit, gotten some on the pants, maybe on the shirt as well. You know, enough that they would be incredibly uncomfortable or even have to go home to change. Maybe next time. Our next story today comes to us from Lord Dunkles. Manager wants me to come in sick. Let's jump right in. So I have been sick for the past few days. I have a fairly intensive cold that has left me with little sleep and some difficulties breathing when laying down. I figured I should get a doctor's note, so I went to urgent care. Minute Clinic wasn't taking walk-ins due to COVID traffic. The doctor says I have a viral infection in my upper sinuses and upper respiratory regions. Note the lack of specific diagnosis because it comes into play later. I work as a delivery driver at a chain pizza place, which means I frequently handle food and could be a danger to customers if contagious. I send a text to my GM, general manager, and he says, "Don't worry about it, you deserve a few extra days off anyways." I feel at this point that I can rest easy for a few days until I feel better, but in comes my district manager, who wants to know when I will be able to come back into work. My doctor's note doesn't give a date by which I must come back in and just says, "until symptoms have passed." So I tell her I don't know. She says that she will be taking me off the schedule for next week and that I should call her to let her know when I can work again. I tell her that I will and I go back to sleep. District manager calls again later that night, informing me that she has in fact changed her mind and is putting me back on the schedule. My sinuses are feeling a little better, but my sore throat and cough have gotten much worse, so I still feel that it would be irresponsible of me to go be a contagion at a restaurant. She must have been doing the schedule because she informs me that if I do not come in, that she will have to cover my shifts for the week, and that we were delivering in the cold rain last night, so we probably are going to get colds anyway. She says that since my note doesn't have a specific diagnosis on it, that it's not a big deal if I come in anyways. Now, I would almost feel bad for her having to cover my shift if it weren't for the fact that she was the one responsible for driving away all our employees by being such an insufferable butt in the middle of a jobs market where every employer is desperate for workers. Cue malicious compliance. I decide that if she is going to try and make this my problem instead of hers, that I'm going to make it as much her problem as humanly possible. I stop taking all my cough medicines and down a few sodas so that the acidic drink can ravage my larynx. I go to sleep that night, coughing up a lung and a half, barely able to shut my eyes. I get up the next morning and receive a call from district manager checking to make sure I'm coming in today. I told her in my now hoarse, rattly voice that I could come in today, but that I would need her to give me a written, signed notice stating that she was ordering me to ignore my doctor's note saying that I was unfit to work. To my surprise, she agreed. My plan wasn't actually legal action, but rather to have both that note and a doctor's on hand while on deliveries. When customers would ask the obviously sick, hacking, coughing delivery girl if she was alright, I would simply tell them no, and I have a doctor's note saying as much as well. But I also have this note from my manager saying to disregard the doctor's note and that I am fit to handle your food. As our store didn't require masks for vaccinated employees, nobody but me was wearing a mask that day when I walked in with my doctor's note and inhaler. I guess district manager must have either wisped up or talked to her higher-ups because she was singing a very different tune when I walked in the door. No longer is it, "Come in because I will have to cover your shifts if you don't." Instead it was, "Oh, I just needed you to come in so I could ensure you had a doctor's note." I had already sent an image of it to the general manager. "You don't have to stay today. You should go home and get some rest." I, of course, reminded her that she would have to cover my shifts, to which she was now saying she didn't mind, and that I should drink some warm tea and honey for the nasty cough I was sporting. So here I am at home now in my bed, writing this all down before I sleep and forget all the details. If you've ever made a statement to someone, and that someone has said right back to you, "Hey, can I get that in writing?" you need to stop for a second, sit back and go, "What the F did I just say?" Because obviously, if they want it in writing, they want to use it against me. Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.